morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Financial Insight coverage of First National Bank right here at the Cape Town International Convention Center, where we are at the annual Investing in Mining Indaba. And I'm about to have a conversation with two good friends of ours from the bank. I've got Luyanga and Chileshe. Gentlemen, how are you doing? Luyanga?
I'm well, Mwelwa. It's good to be here. The Mining Indaba is always a very special event. Always learn something new, always get to interact with great people. So yeah, looking forward to what the rest of the program has to offer.
Absolutely, and obviously for this format, we now also have Chileshe. So guys, you guys are now part of our first sort of panel discussion, as Financial Insight and FNB. So Chileshe, how are you finding Mining Indaba so far?
Very good, very insightful. Day one was quite a marathon with the opening ceremony and other sideline events. Looking forward to what the next 2 to 3 days have to offer as well.
Absolutely. So, gentlemen, we'll get straight into it. Yesterday was obviously monumental. President Hakainde Hichilema, delivers his maiden speech at this particular event. Just for our viewers, obviously, the president hasn't attended the last two, so this one was obviously quite significant. I know, Luyanga, we had our first interview as the bank was preparing to come to Indaba. Yeah. Now that you're here and listening, from our lead policymaker, our president, what were your reactions and takeaways from that speech?
Yeah, I think it was monumental. The fact that he actually made an appearance, and I think it shows a strong commitment that Zambia has towards developing the mining sector in Zambia. And I think if you look at his speech, he made reference to his appearance in 2022 and the pronouncements and the objectives that they had at that particular point in time. So it was really good to get his assessment of the progress that had been made over the last 4 years, and to really sort of get his reaffirmation that government was committed towards, first of all, getting to that 3 million metric tons of copper production target by 2031, but then ensuring that the environment, the business environment, the investment climate, the policy environment was suitable to actually encourage mining companies to continue to invest. And he also gave a summary of how much commitments from an investment pledges perspective had actually come through, and some of the key projects that would benefit from that. So I think for me, it was a very good platform just to get a sense of the performance over the last 4 years, and a recommitment around ensuring that the country remained on target to meet its copper production aspirations. And not just copper. I mean, we talk about copper because copper is the mainstay of the economy. But then how do we then pull in the production of some of these other minerals that Zambia is endowed with, as well as the region?
Absolutely. Now, obviously, Chileshe, you obviously look at, from all this from an economic perspective. Zambia has obviously been experiencing some very encouraging macros. I've been speaking to many delegates who are saying, Zambia is kind of being described as the turnaround kid. Chileshe, what are some of the economic fundamentals that are obviously exciting the mining industry, and why Zambia is now a key focus for investment?
So it's actually a bit of both. And I think just to reference and piggyback off what Luyanga was speaking around the president's speech, he did reference 2022, that speech he did here at the Mining Indaba, and some of the policy work that the government was looking to do to encourage the investment. So there's a very strong linkage between the Zambian economy and mining. Obviously, it's one of the 3 largest sectors within the economy, and obviously from a forex earning perspective, it's actually the largest contributor as well. Largest contributor in terms of tax as well from a fiscal perspective. So it's a key sector. And if you remember, then there was a lot of focus around how do we get reinvestment into the sector and how that's going to support the economy. So it should come as no surprise that with the reinvestment into the sector, the uplift in terms of production, but also benefiting sort of from the commodity super cycle globally, we're seeing the prices go up significantly. You can now see how that's translating into the better economic performance. So inflation is down, that's mostly a function of base effects, but also the improvement in terms of the currency itself. The performance has been magnificent over the last 6 to 12 months or so. And we can see that since the start of the year, it's one of the best performing currencies in the world. comes as no surprise, obviously, with what's happened from a copper price perspective. So the expectation is that as a country, as we fix the mining sector from a policy perspective, it shouldn't come as a surprise that then you see this improvement in the overall macros, because the two are quite closely linked.
Yeah.
So that was the sort of theme. So the two things are actually speaking to each other. Improvement from a policy perspective in mining and the broader economy, of course, then supporting investments which are benefiting the rest of the economy, and then sending a further cue to investors saying this economic performance then justifies more investment into the economy. So sort of backwards and forward linkages between the two, broader economy and the mining sector. So that was the sort of theme I was picking up, and it's good to then confirm what I had initially thought after yesterday's speech.
Right, right. Now, obviously, Luyanga, now that, the economic fundamentals are seemingly getting into a stable sort of state, I remember we did talk about the importance of sophistication in some of the deals that you actually structured. How do you see the landscape in terms of deal structuring for mining, especially in Zambia, in terms of the sort of transactions that the bank is capable of closing?
Yeah. So I think another key point that the president touched on, and this is something that he's very passionate about, is the risk premiums that are charged on African projects, and how that tends to make a lot of these projects very expensive and affect the economic viability of these projects. And like Chileshe mentioned, now that we're seeing a broad improvement in the macros, with some of the rating agencies actually upgrading Zambia out of that default status, we then expect that the cost of capital should then start to come down as that risk premium is also reduced. So I think that will help, one, in terms of the flow of capital coming into the economy. Like I mentioned, we've seen quite a number or quite an amount of investment coming in for some of the larger projects. So that will help to create that liquidity in the market to really start to foster growth and start to drive activity in terms of either new mining ventures, expansion projects, or indeed looking at how you then enhance production. So with the cost of capital expected to come down, I do think that you'll start to see it become a lot more practical to mobilize funding domestically. And that's really where the banks can come in and play a role. So if you look at the theme of this conference, it's really around stronger together, progress through partnerships. And when I look at partnerships, I look at it at three levels. And these are some of the themes that were touched on yesterday. One is through, you've got international investors partnering with local businesses. You've got international investors also partnering with the local financial markets. So in this instance, the banks that then can provide some level of funding. But then you've also got that critical partnership of public and private, right? So yeah, it's really about how do you promote those partnerships across those three areas. So I think finance and financial institutions have got a critical role to play in unlocking the opportunities that are being presented in the mining sector.
Right, right. Now, obviously from where you're sitting, would you say that now that we've got fairly, stable macros going forward, how important will that be, especially from a bank perspective, in terms of, encouragement in, unlocking more investment in the sector?
It's everything, right? So everything feeds off the rest of the economy. And now, to Luyanga's point around that risk premium coming off quite significantly, and the expectation is that that trend is going to continue going forward, it then allows the financial sector overall to then be able to extend more credit to this sector, obviously at better cost as well. And if you sort of link that to the next point around local content, local beneficiation, what that then means is downstream, right? So maybe not tomorrow, we may not be able to, as a financial sector within Zambia, finance a whole-scale mining project, right? Maybe the financial sector has not yet developed to that extent today and tomorrow, but way more into the future that could be possible. But just downstream businesses that can be supported right now. And that's why that local content bill was quite important. And the president also spoke to it yesterday. because that's how not only do you just rely on those tax earnings, but also the forex earnings, but now you also have local businesses benefiting from what's happening within the mining sector. And those local businesses now can partner with the banks. Most of them will be SMEs. So then the bank gets to play a bigger role with financing and supporting that downstream business. So everything is coming together quite nicely. And that's why some of those policy initiatives that were sort of started in 2022 become very important, because it does take time for everything to come together nicely. But at least we're seeing that every single year that progress is translating slowly. So the expectation now is, as these macros continue to consolidate, and we feel there's a bit more runway for that to actually continue, the investments, external investments keep coming in. They can then be supported by local investments, particularly from the financial sector, to then support downstream businesses. So you can see the president's picture coming in together quite nicely now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Maybe, Chileshe, maybe just to wind up on a final note from you, with the conversations that you've had with many of the delegates that you've engaged with, are you sensing a bit more of an upbeat sort of feel on Zambia, especially on the macro side?
Absolutely. So upbeat in terms of Africa, more broadly speaking. I mean, given all these geopolitical tensions, it's then allowing Africa to be a bit more internally focused. So we're seeing those conversations around internal collaboration, aggregating local demand, reducing the speed to port, which was one of the key points that was raised yesterday, and seeing how we can be more internally focused in terms of adding value to a lot of these minerals that come out of Africa. Now, by extension, also from a Zambian perspective, the buzz, the feel, it helps that the president was a keynote speaker yesterday, obviously. So it sort of speaks to how a lot of how the investment community is viewing Zambia. And that's why getting your policy environment is quite important. And once that policy environment starts translating into economic growth and improving macros, it then reinforces the message to investors who positively respond. So the president yesterday also spoke to some of the investments that have come in since 2021 when they came into government. And the expectation now is, given this commodity super cycle, that we internally actually view to be a bit more structural, given some of the challenges from a copper supply perspective globally, declining ore grades and so on and so forth. Then that, coupled with the fact that on the demand side, there's a lot more demand coming in, particularly from this drive in data centers and the whole AI technology that's building up, that then puts together a good story where you should expect copper prices and critical mineral prices to remain higher for longer. And then that supports more investments going forward. So Zambia is really well positioned going forward. It's just, can we capitalize? And if you recall, in the 2010s, we had a similar type of trend, but we didn't quite capitalize on it quite well. This time, there's another opportunity is presented. So far, we have confidence that the policies are paying off. So you should see this bear a bit more fruit than the previous commodity super cycles. So we're excited as FNB Zambia about it.
Absolutely, and I'm sure Luyanga, you also share that excitement. I mean, if you can close this off, just to tell us about what opportunities you're now seeing now, especially with macros being the way they are, and obviously even with some of the conversations that you're having, where the opportunities lie for Zambia.
Well, the opportunities, Moono, are quite abundant. I think if you look at, like we've said, the posture is very upbeat now. Over the last 4 years, there is demonstrable progress that has really been made. So it's about looking at how do we then enhance the mining ecosystem, not only in the country, but in the region. So I mentioned earlier that although copper remains the mainstay of our economy, there are a number of other minerals that Zambia is endowed with, where we really just have to look at creating structures and formalizing the processes so that we can reap the benefits out of that. A comment was made yesterday that all minerals are actually critical for the economic transformation of not only Zambia, but the broader continent as well. So even as we look at increasing mining production within the sector, with that comes all the ecosystem, all the supporting infrastructure. There was mention made around the corridors yesterday, talking about the Lubito corridor, talking about Tazara, talking about all the other sort of corridors that exist within the region that will support drive activity within the mining sector. We speak about energy, for example. If Zambia is to attain that 3 million tons target by 2031, we need to almost quadruple the amount of power that we generate as a country. So there's opportunities in that energy supply chain. The financial sector, again, can come in to support that. We've spoken about local content, how we want to ensure that the key essentials, materials required, again, in that mining ecosystem, that those can be sourced locally. I think when we heard the AFC yesterday talking about how Africa has got one of the lowest per capita consumptions of steel, even though we've got high-grade iron ore in abundance on this continent. So how do we then ensure that we're managing the costs, that we're minimizing, optimizing the costs by taking advantage of the infrastructure that we have as a country? And I think the last point is really around regional coordination when it comes to the putting up and building of critical infrastructure. I think the president is always making the point that Zambia's location is very, very good for us. So we're not landlocked, but we're land-linked with 8 neighbors plus 1, the one being Burundi that we're connected with through Lake Tanganyika. So there's no reason why each country should try and take the burden on by itself. We can look at where do we have that comparative advantage, what do we need to finance in order for us to supplement and complement some of the infrastructure that will help us to really get the best of that mining ecosystem. So I must say, opportunities are really, really abundant. It's a very exciting time to be in Zambia, to be in the region, to be doing business within the region. And as a bank, we believe very strongly in shared prosperity. So as a bank grows, we also need to uplift the living standards of our society and our communities as well. And that's a key role that we are looking to continue to play, and a mandate that we hope and we're seeking to make sure that we execute quite well as a bank.
Absolutely. No, gentlemen, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
All right. So you've heard it for yourself. We've been speaking to Luyanga and Chileshe from FNB. So stay tuned for more insights as we continue to cover FNB at Mining Indaba 2026. I've been your host, Mother Sekunda, and as we always say, Financial Insight, get to know.